Hi, this next episode with Joseph Petrelli. I'm super excited to bring you this episode. I hope I do a good job of telling Joe's story and just asking questions. Joe has been in the industry for a long, long time, and he is known throughout the whole industry by insurance carriers, insurance agents, and the rating industry is very, very interesting. So Joe get to tell his story on how he started and where he is today, and why are we seeing so much frequency these days on insurance claims. Probably could have done 2 or 3 more episodes just on that alone. But anyways, I hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome to Founder's Journey. We have Joseph Petrelli on the guest today. How are you?
I'm good, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Our audience don't know how cool this one is until we tell them how cool this one is. Joseph Petrelli, he is the founder and CEO of DemoTech. And today, we brought him on the show today. I want to ask him about his journey, about how he started DemoTech, and just go back to the beginning. What got you into insurance and what led you to DemoTech? So, Joe, I'm going to turn the mic over to you. And if we can hear about your personal journey, the wins, the losses, and how'd you get here?
Yeah, thank you. In terms of how I got into the insurance business, we're going to go back. It was 1969, right? And we didn't have the internet. We had books. And one of the most famous books around was Reader's Digest. And Reader's Digest had a book that if you held it one way, it gave you all the colleges in New York State in alphabetical order, and within college, the majors that those colleges offered. And if you flipped the book the other way, it gave you all the majors offered in New York State, and within major, the colleges that offered them. And I was always pretty good in math, pretty good in business, and so I flipped it the way for degrees that were offered in New York State. And right after Aardvark comes actuarial science, the College of Insurance, New York City. I looked into it and went to the College of Insurance, was on a work study program. The thing I remember about that book, it cost my mom 50 cents. And Reader's Digest is why we're here.
Wow, the inspiration was Reader's Digest.
Yep. And went to the College of Insurance. I worked at the Insurance Rating Bureau as a work study student, and that became Insurance Services Office, which became Verisk. So I worked at Verisk before it was ISO, when it was the Insurance Rating Bureau, and they were just consolidating the different rating bureaus: Multi-Line Insurance Rating Bureau, Fire Insurance Research, Actuarial Association. They were combining the property and the casualty bureaus into one, and that was the Insurance Rating Bureau. And from there, went to a small company in upstate New York, and then went to Nationwide for a couple of years. And from 1980 to date, been on my own. And then Sharon and I formed DemoTech in the fall, September 9th, 1985. So it's our almost our 39th anniversary.
Well, congratulations to almost 39th anniversary.
Yeah.
So go back for a second. You mentioned Nationwide insurance carrier.
Yes, sir.
And how did that start? Like, did you choose Nationwide, and who are you choosing between? And are you always a native of Columbus, Ohio?
No, I'm a Rochesterian, Rochester, New York.
Okay.
Went to New York City to go to school, Syracuse, New York to work for Agway Insurance, and then moved to Columbus in 1978 to go to work for Nationwide. And as I tell you what, great company, fine people, just was not cut from Nationwide cloth. So figured I liked Columbus, want to do something here. So I hung out a shingle, and I was a consulting actuary from 1980 to probably 1985 or 6 when we formed DemoTech. The original thought was that we would do actuarial consulting as a sole proprietor, and we would do other work in insurance within DemoTech. And at the end of the day, the actuarial work and the consulting work seemed to blur, so we just put everything into DemoTech. And then 1988 is where we got into ratings. We heard that the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had asked AM Best to review and rate smaller independent regional carriers, which they did not rate at that time. And AM Best advised Anita Champ, who was the coordinator of this effort at Fannie Mae, they advised her that it was impossible. And that was her word, not mine, that they told her. We actually have an article where she discusses the fact that they said it was impossible. We did it. We went to them with a formula. We developed a formula and a process that worked for smaller companies, clearly involved review of reinsurance. And we got approved May 1, 1989. We were the first to review and rate independent, regional, and specialty companies for Fannie Mae. And then January 1st or 2nd, 1990, must have been the 2nd, 1990 for Freddie Mac. And today we review and rate about 450 companies, every line of business, coast to coast, DC, Puerto Rico, Alaska, Samoa, and Guam, and a couple other licenses in there as well. So it's been a fun ride.
Wow. I'm going to slow this down for a second because I have so many questions.
Fire away.
Who was your first client when you started this rating thing, right? Actually, let me go back even further. When you said we're going to go into rating, right? Who was your competitor back then? Like, who was the competitors in the marketplace outside of AM Best?
Well, I mean, the reality is AM Best is the competitor. They are, in many ways, they are a functional monopoly. They've been written up in statutes and bulletins and even laws. And I think in 2017 or 18, I think the National Council of Insurance Legislators actually drafted a model act about competition among insurer rating organizations. And the Model Act basically said, the states are in charge of insurance, not rating agencies. And there's even a provision in the Model Act that says we made a mistake naming one rating agency all the time. We shouldn't have done it. And so I think the reality is it's AM Best and for the insurance industry. And I think that's much to the chagrin of Standard & Poor's and Moody's, which are appreciably larger and international.
Wow. And when you started this journey, who was that first client that you got landed? Who was the absolutely very first client that says, here's our money, rate us?
Rate us? I'm guessing, I'm actually, you asked me, I have to look it up because it was so long ago, but the truth of the matter is I'm guessing that it was Genesee Patrons Cooperative Insurance Company, which is a small company in upstate New York that has probably been around since 1875 or in that range. And we rated them. Yeah. So I would say Genesee Patrons.
That is a long time that they've been around.
They've been answering the bell forever. You got to respect those small companies that do that, those regional companies.
Are you mostly rating just in the P&C industry? What's the range of ratings? Yeah. Auto, home, commercial?
Everything. I think that predominantly our ratings are P&C. We have several life and health companies. We were also the first to review and rate title underwriters that protect the marketability of title to real property. We began rating them in 1993 before anybody else even thought of it. And we were also the first to review and rate healthcare sharing ministries, which are not insurance companies per se, but they are nonprofits that require a contribution from the members, and then the members seek a reimbursement or a payment. It's a fascinating mechanism, but we were the first to review and rate the Christian healthcare ministries, first to review and rate title underwriters, first to review and rate independent regional specialty P&C companies, and also health maintenance organizations and PPOs way back in the 1980s.
Wow. That is a lot of new category I did not know you guys do. What are some of the newer categories that's coming up today that you see in the marketplace? The new MGAs.
I think we're looking at protected cell captives and segregated cells, which is a growing area. We actually have proposals out to the 4 largest healthcare sharing ministries, which are not insurance. We have some public entity liability insurance pools that we are rating. I would say is probably the dominant thing right now is the protected cell captives And we also rate risk retention groups. We probably have about 10% of that market that we review and rate. And I think, one of the things we pride ourselves on is our staff is been here. Our chief ratings officer, Barry Kessler's been with us 30 years. Bob Warren, who's a CPCU and an inactive CPA, Bob's been with us 20 years. Doug Powell's got an MBA. Doug's been with us 20 years. So one of the advantages we have is you don't have to teach our people about insurance. They've been there, they've done that, they've seen everything. So I think from my perspective, we're quite capable of looking at something that's relatively new, coming up with a solution if there's a rating process that's applicable.
So many questions, because this is like an area that most people don't know, including myself. Like, we don't even know about this rating industry, right? So when you guys go rate it, what are the areas that you look at a company? So hypothetically, let's just say I am starting an insurance carrier, a mutual carrier in my state. And what are all the areas that you guys say, hey, I need you to turn over this information?
Well, I think, I don't know that we could hit all the areas, but some of the major ones that we look at, I think let me take a step back. July 11th of 2022, we were registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission as a nationally recognized statistical rating organization, and our class is insurance companies. There's 5 classes. We only have insurance companies. There's 10 nationally recognized statistical rating organizations, and each of us have to publish what's called our rate making procedures and processes. So I'm kind of going from memory on what would be in there in terms of talking about the criteria. One of the major things we look at is the quality of the reinsurance. And by that we mean not just who you bought it from, but also does it complement your business model? So you may have, if you're growing quickly, you may want a quota share program. If you're financially stable and you have a long history in a particular line, you might want to look at excess reinsurance. So we look at the reinsurance piece, and we think and certainly in cat-prone areas, the catastrophe reinsurance program is a significant review item. The other thing we'll look at is just at the balance sheet, because at the end of the day, we think the balance sheet will dictate the income. For example, if you have reasonable loss reserves, adequate loss reserves, at any given point in time, your income is going to be relatively accurate. However, if you under reserve in your balance sheet, that adverse reserve development is going to show up over time. It's going to impact your income. So you have to have adequate loss reserves to have accurate income. And we actually developed a measure that's published on our website of how companies have done that. We call it SPQUELA. It's long-winded initials for the name of the measure, but it's on our website for every company. And it's public information, based on public information, and it's a free site for that. So we're looking at the quality of loss reserves, the quality of income, the balance sheet integrity. Certainly, rate adequacy is important, because one of the questions that gets asked is, where'd you get your rates from? How'd you develop those? And we'll also look at the liquidity of the company. Not that everybody pays all their claims at once, but we like to see a relatively high position of cash and invested assets to total liabilities. That's one of our published measures. The other one is total liabilities to surplus. Let me spend a minute on that, if I may. When you have a ratio of total liabilities to surplus, that's going to be usually page 3 of the annual statement or the quarterly statement. The higher that ratio is, like, for example, if somebody's at 3-to-1 liabilities to surplus, the 2 biggest components of liabilities are going to be the loss reserves and the unearned premium reserve. We view those as being related, because if you don't have your loss reserves right, then you don't have your pricing correct either. So the loss reserves and the unearned premium reserve are going to move in the same direction. If one is inadequate, the other one will be inadequate. At a 3-to-1 ratio, a 10% inadequacy in pricing and in loss reserves, because it's 3-to-1, if reserves and unearned premium are inadequate by 10%, that 3 is going to become 3.3, excuse me, because it comes out, it's 10% inadequate, but the surplus will go down from a 3-to-1, it'll go to a 0.7. So the ratio of total liabilities to surplus is also the leverage that you have against your surplus. So somebody at 4-to-1 has more leverage and should be more concerned about the adequacy of reserves than somebody who's at 2-to-1, because the impact, it's a multiplier of the impact of being wrong on your loss reserves or your pricing. Kind of a long-winded explanation, but I'm hopeful people will understand that.
I'm going to give you two more questions. When you guys have successful rating for carriers, they do their business, but when a carrier get downgraded from A plus to A to A minus or even B, right? Like, what's the consequences when insurance carriers and MGAs get downgraded?
Well, I think just to be clear that I think the rating categories you talked about, those are not our categories, they're somebody else's. But conceptually, usually for most insurance agents, E&O policies, or insurance agents, professional liability, the trigger for protection against placing business with the carrier, for a DemoTech rated carrier, it's usually A or better, sometimes S or better. So what you would be concerned about as a producer is if what they call the insolvency provision in that professional liability policy, if it goes below the trigger. I think one important thing for your producers who are listening is in virtually all professional liability policies, E&O policies for agents, and you're talking Westport, Utica, Liberty Mutual, all the big players. It's usually only AM Best and DemoTech that are recognized in there. So if they're placing business with a company that's not AM Best rated or not DemoTech rated, they might not have protection against the insolvency of a carrier. But the implications usually, well, let me also say this. When we're working with a company, it's not a hair trigger. That company will know you have been rated at this level because we like, or your criteria A, B, C, D, E meet our criteria, therefore we assign a rating. But we monitor that every quarter. So at any given point in time, if A, B, C, D, E become out of the range or out of what we think is an appropriate balance, we're going to alert that company to it, and we're going to say, what are you doing to correct this? And more often than not, they'll have a response that says, well, we know that, we got a rate filing in, or we're increasing reserves, or we're doing whatever it might be. But it's a very participative process, and we do not take unilateral action. The company always knows what's going on. They might not like what we're doing, but we'll always communicate with them about it.
So I know that you guys work with not just, regional carriers, but you guys work with coastal carriers, right? You are advising me, and I'm a founder, right? Let's just say I am in the homeowner space, right? And today I'm in Ohio. And tomorrow I say, hey, Joe, rank the toughest states for me to start insurance in. I'm going to give you 6 states: New York, California, Louisiana, Texas, South Carolina, and Georgia. Which one is the first state you advise me to go into, and which one is the last? Thank you for all your support to our channel. Here is a quick word from our sponsor. Please click on the link below in the comment section to sign up for a demo with Track AI.
What if your insurance sales conversations could work harder for you? Meet Track, your AI-powered conversation intelligence partner. Track automatically captures and analyzes every customer interaction, providing instant call summaries, risk analysis, and AI-driven coaching insights. Say goodbye to manual note-taking and hello to more selling time. Track handles the admin work while you handle the revenue. Fully integrated with your favorite platforms. Plus, get custom AI analysis tailored to your unique business needs. Transform your sales team's performance with Track. Visit track.ai today.
Click the link in the description below to schedule a demo with Track today.
Well, let's be careful. I have to be careful there because we're not allowed to give advice. Neither DemoTech nor any NRSRO is allowed to give advice about where somebody should go, because the SEC would look at that as kind of grading your own work if you give recommendations. But that being said, I think that, based on public information, you would look at those states and you'd think that, based on the public information in the readily available, the Insurer or Insurance Journal or Daily News Flash, any of those places, you hear about the coastal exposure. The big issue on coastal exposure is, the reinsurance component of the price. And so I think the companies become very well aware of the reinsurance component differing by state. So when you're a primary company and you're looking at a Texas, a New York, a South Carolina, a California as an expansion from, in your example, Ohio, you're going to look at the anticipated reinsurance costs associated with that state. And my guess is those companies are going to go with the states where they have the highest protection on the reinsurance side at the most reasonable cost so that they can retain more net. And I think that's pretty much been what we've seen from the companies, is they're making financial decisions based on the cost of reinsurance in the various states, because when they go into a market, they're relatively small carriers. They're heavily reinsured, and that's the biggest expense that they're going to see. So they're looking, I think, to maximize coverage at the minimum reinsurance cost.
So much has been said about reinsurance in this episode. Do you see new players coming onto the marketplace that want to compete in the reinsurance space for the U.S. property casualty carriers?
Well, I think probably the biggest competitor on that right now would be the ILS markets or the cat bonds, where they're looking to put together, specific programs for specific companies, and they're using capital from outside the reinsurance community. I think it's going to be tough. I know that when you look back to the 1990s, I think Bermuda has had several years where there's been a fair number of Bermuda carriers that have been reinsurance carriers that have been formed. I don't see that happening now, just because $100 million used to be, I think some of the big companies today that have billions of net worth started out with 50 or $100 million 15 or 20 or 30 years ago. And $100 million, sadly, is insufficient, I think, for someone to be a decent sized reinsurer. So the days of raising a couple billion or two, I don't think there's going to be many reinsurers that answer that bell, not new ones.
Wow. Would that be a place where you think if we have more players in the industry that it can help solve some of the situation that's going on the rising cost of reinsurance?
I think from my perspective, I'm kind of the actuarial side of me. I kind of understand what the reinsurers are doing. If a reinsurer wants to participate in your loss experience, they're going to write quota share. If they're an excess of loss player, or they're in a layer of a reinsurance treaty, they want to make some money, and they have a cost to capital, and there's a risk associated with, participating in the reinsurance. I think the reinsurance community basically said, you know what, we're letting you play in the insurance marketplace you're in because we are lending you, that's in air quotes, we are lending you our capacity through our reinsurance treaties. And I think if I'm an international reinsurer and I'm well respected and I'm responsive to the primary markets I serve, I think they're going to be aggressive on their pricing. And I got to be honest with you, I think they deserve it. So that's a long-winded way of saying I get used to reinsurance pricing at a relatively high level.
So the last 3 straight years, the property casualty carriers on the home side have lost money in the U.S., right? Someone's, I think, had an article that says they lost about $15 billion. Do you think 2024 we break profit?
No, I don't. I think sadly the property insurance markets from coast to coast, especially the catastrophe prone areas, I think cost of reinsurance is going up. I think if you look at some of the research that DemoTech facilitated in 2022, there was the discovery of what we are calling tech-enabled claim instigation, where online opportunists are looking to secure contested claims by using search engine optimization, using litigation platforms, litigation funding, which is third-party liability financing, and also using litigation marketing. There's companies out there today, plaintiffs' attorneys, who have already purchased from Google or Bing the names of all the storms. So when NOAA name says this is the name of the storms that we're going to use this season, they buy those names, and they already have websites that they can pop up a website tomorrow if another storm of the appropriate name becomes forming. So the websites will be up often before the storms make landfall. The websites are up before the storms make landfall. So I think the litigation industry, if you will, and the change in the frequency of litigated claims, there's more of them. It's by design. It's through the tech-enabled claim instigation. I don't see the pricing becoming under control until the claim frequency, particularly litigation frequency, is brought under control. And on top of it, in the property markets, name one component of fixing or repairing a house that's going to go down. It's not going to be the price of lumber, not going to be the price of tar paper for the roof, it's not going to be the price of shingles, not going to be the cost of the individual that comes there. There's nothing going down. So it's all frequency driven because the severity piece is constantly on the way up.
Yeah, especially not enough is talked about on the private equity backed component to this. There's a lot of private equity just backing all these lawsuits, whether frequencies or class actions, or just, they want a piece of all the actions of these law firms.
Yep. No, you're exactly right.
What year do you think this started spiking?
Based on the research that Todd Kozakowski did on DemoTech's research project, it looks like it was around 2015 when the plaintiffs' attorneys were beginning to build artificial intelligence platforms. And we're not talking about word processors. Think back to 1999 when IBM built Deep Blue, and Deep Blue, the computer, played chess against Garry Kasparov. And first two games, Kasparov won. But after that, Deep Blue, through artificial intelligence, beat Kasparov, who was the world champion. That was 25 years ago. And the artificial intelligence has moved along, and the plaintiffs' firms have been very aggressive using artificial intelligence, whether it's in their platforms or search engine optimization. So I would say 2015, they got about a 9 or 10 year head start on the industry, Jeff.
Is this just in properties, or are we talking about auto, commercial?
Every line of business is being impacted. And the truth of the matter is every industry is impacted. When Todd expanded his research to other industries, he found out trucking firms, transportation and logistics firms are being targeted, which goes back to the nuclear verdicts in commercial auto liability, goes back to the concept of social inflation. The other thing that's happening, every line, every industry, with the artificial intelligence platforms, the ability to replicate suits has brought down the cost of preparing litigation to the point where it's much easier today to file a lawsuit and much less expensive for the plaintiff's firm, whereas the cost of defending, because the insurance industry has certain rules in every state, the cost of defending a claim is relatively constant if you're litigated. but the cost of bringing that claim has dropped like a rock over the last 10 or 15 years. It's a mismatch for the industry.
So how does insurance carrier go from here? How do they, I mean, what is some of the solutions?
Well, I think on the litigation side, in terms of the development, the tech-enabled claim instigation, where someone has encouraged your policyholder to sue you, I think that's outside DemoTech's purview. That's something that Forewarn has developed some solutions to. Forewarn is the company that Todd Kozakowski built out of the research and information that he got through DemoTech's research. I think the companies need to start hitting back. I think that the other thing they need to do is they need to understand that the litigation change in litigation frequency is not related to any one thing. It's a combination of the effort of search engine optimization, litigation marketing, litigation financing, and also the litigation platforms. It's amazing what's happening. I read one industry publication for lawyers that specifically indicated that law firms that are plaintiffs' law firms should be investing 20% of top line revenue in technology to help them stay ahead and be lean and technologically capable. I think if an insurance company said they were going to try to spend 20% of top line revenue on technology, they just, but that's what they're up against. So, the insurance companies are the ones who need to find a way to push back at these litigated claims. And I think it's unfortunate because our industry probably, and I've been in it forever, but never in its history have we had a worse reputation. So the idea that you have to sue an insurance company to get your money, I think that has some popular appeal, even though I'm a firm believer that most insurance companies bend over backwards to do the right thing. And they deserve an opportunity to try to settle those claims. But the people with the microphone and the money are saying the opposite.
Wow. I am just trying to digest everything you just said about the litigation and revenues investing in top lines from these plaintiffs.
20%. They talk about 20% of revenue. It's an astounding thing.
Wow, that's what the insurance carriers are up against every single day.
Day in, day out. And the thing that, again, it's not it's Forewarn's research project. Every company is targeted online. It's just a matter of degree. And it's astounding, the creativity that is used online. I mean, think about it. If I'm sitting there talking to my wife and we both have our iPads or our electronic devices and they say, hey, you know what, I'm going to CVS. Do you need anything? 2 minutes later, you get a pop-up ad. Vitamin C's on sale at CVS. Same thing is happening with litigation. There's actually an app that was presented, and I think there's TV ads about the app, and from a national law firm. Basically, click here to retain us, and we'll sue on your behalf. You just have a few data points to put in, and you don't even have to get off your couch. You don't have to pick up the phone. We have an app for that. And it's gotten to the point now where the technology is being leveraged against insurance companies. And that's why we've seen this proliferation of litigation frequency. But that being said, we have the ability to fight back. And the truth of the matter is, you have companies that are trying in the claims department and in their marketing efforts, explain insurance, make sure that people have the 800 number. They have an app for reporting a claim directly to the company. The company gets an opportunity to settle it first. We've always had litigation in our industry, so it's always an option. But when you use it as a first option, there's a cost associated with that gets passed on to all consumers because the company's losses or loss adjustment expense are going up. So I'm a firm believer, giving companies a chance to do the right thing, I think they'll do it. And then you could use litigation or arbitration or mediation, but not right. First notice of loss should not be a suit from a plaintiff's attorney.
And so much learning on this episode. This is not just, hey, let's listen to Joe's journey, but I have learned a lot on this episode. Joe, what does the next year look like for you, traveling wise, and any big thing on the horizon for DemoTech and for Joe?
Well, we like to use our quarterly magazine, the DemoTech Difference, to kind of get the word out and say hi to people. But I think I enjoy speaking. Been invited to a few present. The PIA is going to have us out either February or May. Speak to the agents. I love talking to independent agents. Got a few speaking engagements lined up with, Insurance Accounting Statistical Association. Actually speaking to the Ohio Association of Professional Surplus Lines offices next week. So it's just, it's a great industry. People always need continuing education, and we're always glad to put together good content for them.
That's awesome. I'm going to put all your links in the comment section. So this way that people want to get a hold of you, they want to get a hold of DemoTech, or follow your magazine, or follow Forewarn, they can all click on the link in the comment below. And I'll get with you on offline to get all that information for our audience so they can connect with you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming out. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.